friends, and welcome to the Imago Nutrition Podcast, where we answer your questions and give you practical nutrition strategies to help you and your family flourish. Today, if you are someone who is perhaps struggling or have struggled, continue to struggle with what we would call in general terms emotional eating, I think today is going to be particularly practical, particularly helpful in that, because a lot of us struggle with emotional eating at times. That includes Danielle and myself. So we are not above this in any way, shape, or form. But it is something that many people over the course of the years, Danielle, and the decades and decades that we've been doing this, it is a constant theme that comes up in our conversations. And so I think listeners out there will really resonate with this. And so I'm excited to get into this topic. If you have a question, you can send that our way, or a topic you'd like us to consider covering on this podcast. You can send those requests to us. You can go to our website, imagonutrition.com. That's IMAGO.com. I'm sorry, Imago Nutrition, IMAGO Nutrition.com. I wonder who has imago.com. I might have to actually look that up. And /podcast. So imagonutrition.com/podcast. You can fill out that form and send us your topic for consideration. So Danielle, I'm excited to get into this. We have essentially a 5-step process, or 5 things that we want to deploy against this concept of emotional eating. But maybe if I could put you on the spot, how have you seen this theme come up over the years in your own practice, in our practice together, in talks with family, friends, personal conversations? Maybe help me give a little backdrop to where we kind of see this coming up. And then again, we're going to talk about ways to actually overcome it for the listeners.
Yeah. Well, I think, we talk about the functions of food. So eating for pleasure and eating for purpose. And so I think a lot of people may not even realize they're eating out of an emotion, because there's so many great things that come from food with taste, and it gives comfort. It's something that we use to celebrate in our culture. So I think there's ways to enjoy food, but we want to think about, are we turning to food for other reasons other than hunger? So I think everyone experiences emotional eating at some point. And it doesn't, I think the classic, I'm eating because I'm sad, or I'm eating because I'm depressed, is not how it looks for everybody.
Very true. That's super well said. Mindful that this is one of I try to look at things a lot of times optimistically. Like, this is something that I think actually denotes the power of food, and actually the beauty of food is that it is so connected to our experience that it often becomes that which we turn to, right, in some of these more emotionally vulnerable or just distracted, scenarios, is that we have such a connection to food because it's actually very powerful. We should not try to devalue the power of food. It's woven into our existence on purpose. But of course, the issue is always when we begin to overuse it or use it improperly, as opposed to having it placed properly. And so I think that's a perfect setup to, this concept of how do we overcome emotional eating, because I think we all do it, myself included, to a certain extent. And as you're going to see, the first step is actually just being mindful of it. Okay. And so the first step to overcoming emotional eating is to be mindful if, when, and in what environments it occurs, right? But Danielle, what are your thoughts on this first one? And then maybe I'll supplement this idea of being mindful around emotional eating.
Yeah. So I always like to say we first want to just identify, are we having any physical signs of hunger? And if we're not, what's going on? What emotion, am I experiencing emotion? How am I feeling right now? I think it's I guess you brought it up to my attention, but I guess it would be my parents' generation or what, but
Mm,
not knowing how to process emotions. Like
hmm.
we have them, and in the past, it was always just like push them down and push them aside. And now I think for the better, it's in movies for kids. Like we have anxiety. What are we going to do about it? It doesn't have to be bad. It can
Mm.
actually help us in some ways. But I think the first step in being mindful is asking, am I having physical signs of hunger because I'm reaching for food? And if I'm not,
Hmm.
then what's going on right now?
That
So kind of pause is really being mindful.
that's such a big one. Is am I experiencing physical hunger, or am I experiencing psychological hunger? Sorry. So am I feeling physical hunger or psychological hunger? And that's really, I've had those moments where I literally open the pantry door and I have to stop myself and say, wait, hold on, think about my stomach right now. Think about actual hunger pangs. Like, am I physically hungry, or am I just doing this out of habit? And that's huge. And so thinking about your hunger, or identifying if it's physical hunger, great. Then you should snack on something in accordance with your goal, right? Or have a meal, or think about your hydration levels, or, did you have, some protein rich, fiber rich breakfast, or, you can think about physical hunger for sure. But if it's psychological hunger, then what I want us to start thinking about is thinking about our thoughts. That's a key, is actually thinking about your thoughts. Oh, or I guess I could also say thinking about your lack of thoughts as well, right? It's like, oh, wait a minute. I just found myself at the fridge. I just found myself at the pantry, opening up the door, and I was running through my presentation this afternoon in my head. I wasn't purposefully thinking about, nourishing my body. And it's almost, look, I've been teaching this stuff. You've been teaching this stuff. We've been teaching this stuff for decades. And I still catch myself doing this. I'm like, wait a minute, what am I doing standing at the pantry right now? I had a really great breakfast. It's 10:30. I'm not physically hungry. And I'm standing there with the door open looking at the Triscuits. And I'm like, what's going on? Right. So this first step is really just be mindful that it takes place. Be mindful that it takes place with everyone, but actually thinking about your thoughts and identifying if it's physical hunger or psychological hunger is huge. So let's talk about the actual emotions, right, Danielle? So that's number one, is be mindful. The second step to overcoming emotional eating, I would say, is to actually identify the driving emotion. And we've got 8. There are more. We're not saying this is the sum total of human existence, but here are 8 emotions that you may need to begin identifying as a step toward overcoming emotional eating. Number one, I would say, is if you're feeling anxious. Okay. And by the way, in a second, we're going to talk about actual tactics and nutrition strategies, or other strategies to deal with each of these, but we're just going to list them here because we're identifying these emotions. So number one is feeling anxious. Okay. Number two is feeling bored. Number three is feeling celebratory. Okay. Number four is feeling depressed. Number five is feeling distracted, or not realizing that you're distracted. You're not feeling distracted. You just actually are distracted. Number six, feeling lonely. Number seven, feeling sad. Number eight, feeling stressed. Okay. So the second step to overcoming emotional eating, I would say, is identifying your emotion. Are you anxious? Are you bored? Are you celebratory? Are you depressed? Are you distracted? Are you lonely? Are you sad? Are you stressed? So on this one, before we get into kind of how to work with these, Danielle, I wanted to put us both on the spot and say, if you had to pick one of these that you struggle with most often, which one would that be in your life?
So mine's not on the list. I would say I struggle with being tired most. So,
Oh, we should have. Oh, I failed. I set up, confession, I set up the notes for this podcast episode, so I failed tired. So talk to us about that. That's a bonus for all the listeners. That's the ninth. That's the bonus. You heard
there you
it first
go.
time with me. Talk to me about that.
So I think it's normally like at the end of the day. I think when I want to reward myself for a hard day's work, or just
Mm.
I just feel like I want to stay awake to spend some time with Jared, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I guess I need something to eat because I'm so tired.
Mm-hmm.
Which I've gotten so much better at this because I think I associated it with TV. And once I broke that association, it helped tremendously.
Hmm.
So, however, unfortunately, I just go to bed and there I have no time with Jared. But I'm at least listening to my body and, honoring that most often when you're tired. I mean, yeah, when you feel hungry at night, you're probably tired. So,
That's a good one. That's a good one. I was struggling with this one because it's probably two for me. I look. I'm an Enneagram 7. I'm an enthusiast. I like people. I like building community. I like gathering. I love getting people together for every sort of reason. So celebratory is one where I tend to get stirred up in the environment, in the emotion and the connection. So celebratory for me is one where I tend to go off, with emotional eating. But I also have to say too, um, since the pandemic and working from home, my office is upstairs, and I do go into the office like 2 days a week. That's kind of new as of the last year. But for like 3 years, I was working completely from home, and I found more and more that I was actually falling into distracted eating because work was on my mind. I was in my home, but I was working, and yet I would find myself thinking about things or taking my laptop down to the kitchen table to kind of change up my environment from my office, and I was just starting to grab food. And so it was a version of distracted for me because my mind was not considering these things. It was just that I was working, and that's a distraction. It wasn't necessarily that I was on my phone scrolling through social media. It was like through work. And then sort of ironically, when I'm at the office, it's actually harder to do that because um, I don't have snacks around. I don't have my kitchen around. I don't have my fridge around, my pantry around. It's just whatever I brought to the office for lunch, or if I'm going out to have my Chipotle at lunch, those are my only options. So I'm actually less likely to overeat at the office than I am now at home when I'm working from home. So for me, it's probably those two. But I love the tired one. And let's just remember that, calories are a unit of energy. And so, reaching for food when you're tired is totally normal. But normal's not always optimal, right? So that's an interesting one. So again, listeners heard it here first with me. You got a bonus emotion, which is number 9, when you're tired. All right. So again, the first step is be mindful of this. Number 2, we would say identify your emotion. And really closely connected to that, we wanted to parse this out as a separate point. Number 3, learn to name and process your emotion without eating. Okay. Now, this one I think is particularly powerful, and I think it is the hinge, right? So if you're mindful, you've identified the emotion. A lot of people, when they identify the emotion, and people that are writing and talking about this topic, they go right from identify the emotion and then deploy a tactic. Okay. I've even seen some people say this entire rubric around emotional eating is really just two things: identify the emotion and do something else, right? I think we've got a little bit more of a robust framework here in terms of be mindful of it, identify the emotion. And then this number 3, I really do think is the pivot. And that's to actually learn to name and process the emotion without overeating. Okay. So that's to actually say in that moment, oh, I'm distracted. Why am I distracted? Actually say it. And I don't mean this in like the just be okay with it, but like you need to be okay feeling that emotion, and you need to name it. You need to say, I'm bored right now. I'm actually anxious right now. I need to think about what has led up to this moment, what this moment means. Yes, what you're about to do is important, and we're going to talk about that next. But I would say learning to actually name it, like call a spade a spade. Sometimes I say it out loud. It's weird. I'm at the pantry door being like, what am I doing? I'm just bored. I just say it out loud. And there is something very powerful about verbalizing it. But Danielle, what are your thoughts on this idea? I know we talked just briefly right before we hit the record button about why we wanted kind of this piece to be separate. But when it comes to learning to name and to begin to process that emotion before we get to the actual strategies you can deploy, any thoughts about that on your end about naming and processing these emotions?
yeah, in a class I took, it was about, forming new pathways in your brain. So the way to, you know, um, make change would be to go down a different pathway.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you are identifying what you're feeling, then that can help you take a different turn. So I thought that was pretty cool, because when you think of like a forest or something, a well beaten path,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be the easiest one to travel on. So if you're,
Yep.
distracted, and you're not going to make note of it, you're naturally going to go down that path. Or if you're bored and you don't make note of it, you're naturally going to go down that path. But if we can, um, say, heads up, this is what I'm feeling right now,
Mm-hmm.
then we can, you know, mentally shift towards another direction.
Super powerful. And if I could throw a little, I didn't plan this, it's not in my notes, so go with me on this one. I would like to lean into the guys just a second here. Does not mean that women, don't have some of the same considerations. But I think we can probably, and if you disagree with me, let me know in a review on the podcast or on our social media. You could drop a comment. But I think guys are less inclined to actually acknowledge these emotions. Maybe that doesn't come as a shock to a lot of listeners, and wives are like, yeah, no, duh, Mark, you don't have to give us a disclaimer about that comment. We know. But I think guys are much less likely today to say, oh, interesting. I'm feeling anxious right now, or I'm feeling lonely right now. I'm feeling sad right now. I think we tend to want to shove all that stuff way deep down, perhaps in concert with generations past and how we were raised. But for guys, especially, I think it's particularly powerful to say what you're feeling. I think hopefully women are better at this than us, but men, we really do need to step up our game in that. I think both sexes struggle with this to varying degrees, but just to lean into the guy listeners, it's incredibly powerful for you to be able to state the reality of what you're experiencing. And this is an opportunity to do that because both men and women are over consuming food in America at alarming rates. Almost 75% of Americans are overweight or obese. Okay, so this affects, and the obesity split is very close, male, female, very close, overweight. And so we're all dealing with this. And I think it's a very powerful place for us to actually begin to call a spade a spade. And then, yes, of course, we can, as you alluded to, Danielle, we can start to choose a different pathway. So we're going to talk about that here in a second, but very powerful. Okay. So again, number one, be mindful. Number two, identify your emotion. Number three, learn to name and begin to process that emotion without going to emotional eating. Okay. Here's number four. We're going to get pretty practical here. Number four is to have other outlets for dealing with or processing these emotions. Okay. And so let me say at the onset, I'm going to say this once, we might repeat it again, which is totally good. I want you to hear from us that if there is medical considerations or therapeutic considerations, we are pro medicine, we are pro therapy. I have zero qualms with saying that at the top. If you have a medical consideration, please work with your doctor. If you have a therapeutic consideration, please work with a therapist. Okay. Medicine and therapy are, we believe, gifts of God's common grace for us to increase human flourishing. You do not have to pretend like you are broken and don't have medical and therapeutic outlets as well. We want to supplement that with some other practical strategies that you can deploy, but know that that is always in concert with medical and therapeutic considerations. That is outside our scope, and we love and cherish the opportunity to help people understand that that is okay. And then we're going to stay within our scope and talk about some other strategies that you can utilize to deal with some of these. Okay. So I hope I set that up well. Danielle, let's walk through our list. And now on the fly, because this is a podcast, at the very bottom, I'm going to add tired. And so we're going to go through our list of 9, but I'm going to rely on you to come up with a strategy on the fly because that was not in my outline. So but I put it at the end so you have time to think about it. So let's start with anxious. And again, anxious, if you have a medical or therapeutic consideration, please lean into those. Please be thankful that in modern Western society, we have a lot of outlets for that. But let's talk about, if you don't have a medical or therapeutic consideration, what are some ways to deal with anxiety? What are your thoughts on that, Danielle?
Yeah. So I like the deep breathing, or you kind of trace a box or a shape on your leg. You're touching And then you're breathing in on one part of the square, breathing out on the other part of the square.
Mm.
It just actually connects your brain. So when you're anxious, your brain is disconnected. So when you deep breathe, you can reconnect your brain so you can
Mm.
actually think. And so that would be one.
It's a good
Um,
one.
I think having for each of these, I think it's important to have one that you can do sitting still if you're tired.
Mm.
Clearly, I deal with being tired a lot.
We need to talk about this. Next episode is on nutritional considerations for more energy for moms.
Yes, that would be great. So, and then one that's active. I think being physically active can also
Mm.
help you feel better
Agree.
in a variety of different emotions. So, so deep breathing would be my non-active one, and then going for a walk or calling a friend while you're walking could be the active one.
That's a big one. And I could give some umbrella ones here. Like you could, going for a walk is, I've heard it been said on social media for better or for worse. Like, I'm not saying going for a walk will solve all of your problems, but there's probably not a problem that will become worse by taking a walk or something like that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to minimize the issues, and maybe apart from like being lonely, like maybe that one doesn't make as much sense. Like, well, I'm still lonely, I'm just walking lonely now. But there are some things like exercise, there are some things like walking, but I also love the deep breathing as well, because like as you say, there's an active and an inactive component. So I think that's huge. And again, I want to just be as clear as possible when it comes to anxiety, which is a rising, issue of our day. If you need medical or therapeutic intervention, please seek that out. I would say on my end, like confiding in a friend, right? You've already named it to yourself. Maybe you name it to a friend. Maybe you have a friend that can walk with you in this. You've got another friend that has expressed that they struggle with anxiety at times. That's okay. There's also research that spending time with pets, if you have a pet, there's like neurological research that says spending time with pets can reduce anxiety and anxious feelings even in healthy adults, right? And so those are just two, whether just talking to someone about it, which is kind of another step in the naming it and processing it. But then like you said, like there's the walk, there's the breathing. I think those are a couple different really poignant strategies that you can deploy. So let's talk about number two. Let's talk about being bored. What are your thoughts on bored eating? Because I think this one's pretty prevalent for a lot of us
Yeah.
at times.
So I would have a list of activities that you enjoy, one with low energy and one with high energy or, normal energy. So, for example, for me, low energy would be like a puzzle or reading or watching TV. And again, trying to practice watching TV without a snack. So
Mm.
disassociating those two activities. And then, if you're bored and you feel active or energetic, I think you can always squeeze in an extra run or whatever,
Yeah.
swim or whatever exercise you enjoy. I think sometimes when I'm a little bored, I just get in the kitchen and start chopping away, making the next meal or what have you. It's always good to get ahead
Yeah.
if you, feel bored. So,
Very cool. Yeah, I had like finish a project, which is hilarious because I'm really bad at doing projects around the house. But like, I like more like maybe intellectual projects, if you will, or, working on business things or working on work projects or thinking about strategy for my soccer teams or, you know, um, just doing some additional social media work for whether it's like my soccer club, Imago, these sort of things that aren't related to my full-time job. So like finishing a project or doing some sort of like productive activity that you enjoy. I also had, watch a movie or read a book, but exactly what you said. But a lot of times the inclination is like, but when I watch TV, I eat. Well, let's practice watching TV without it. Right. That can be a struggle for me at times because I like to watch an episode of, right now I'm in Vikings on Netflix, and I would love to have a bowl of ice cream every time I do that. Like that would be really fun, but in accordance with my goals, that's not always what would be best. So um, I think that's really cool. And so, the other one too, I just thought of this one randomly last night because I already started planning one for next summer, which is ridiculous. But I think it's kind of fun to like think about vacations and go on the Airbnb app and start looking at like, where could we stay if we were to go here? Even if it's not, something in the immediate future, but like, that's fun for me to think about, like traveling with my wife or my kids, and like, oh, if we were to go to North Carolina and stay in the mountains, where would we stay? What sort of cabins are available? That's really fun for me. It's all right there, in for me at least, the Airbnb app or Vrbo, whatever you choose to use. But planning a trip, whether it's realistic or not, like just have fun with it, something that you enjoy. I think those are great options. So this is another interesting one. What? Oh, you're laughing at me. So what? Yes, I already started planning
We
our.
are so different.
Oh,
Like all of those things would be so unenticing to me if I
oh
was
man,
bored. I'd be
okay, good.
like, no way, I can't do that right now.
Well, that's good. So maybe some of our listeners were just laughing at me when I said that. And the other ones were like, oh my gosh, dude, I already do that. I love that. So, but yeah, I was planning next summer's trip to the Keys for my wife and I. So,
That's so funny.
anyways, so this one's interesting. I think our third one is pretty interesting. Celebratory, right? So I struggle with this one because, again, I like to get caught up in the moment, the connection, and the social environment, which is great. It's actually showing the beauty of food. Like cultures across time and space have used food as a central celebratory environment. So I'm not
Mm-hmm.
devaluing that. I actually think it's beautiful when done appropriately. But I'm curious your thoughts on this one, Danielle, because I know it's kind of a curious one. And if you scour blog articles of like emotional eating, celebratory is not necessarily in many, if any, that I've seen. But we wanted to hear that one out, maybe selfishly, but that one is actually, it's every bit as emotional, though it's generally seen as a positive emotion. We tend to think of emotional eating as negative. This is one of those ones that's like pretty positive. We're getting together
Mm-hmm.
and we're having a great meal, or we're having a backyard barbecue, whatever it is. So I'm curious your thoughts. I have one or two on my own of things that we can do if we get caught up in that celebratory emotional eating.
Yeah, the one I wrote down was just to focus on the people you are with. So, asking them questions about them and listening more
Mm,
intently and not necessarily being distracted by the food.
love it.
So, just kind of honing in on the people. But the other one I thought of just now was that if you're going to a party really hungry, that's not going to go so well.
Yes, good call.
Because, obviously foods at parties are necessary, a little bit more calorie dense. And so if you go to the party feeling slightly hungry, then you're going to kind of set yourself up to success for enjoying the taste of the food. That's why you're there, but
Hmm.
also not, going beyond what you need. So I always have vegetables before I go to a party because there's very little
Hmm.
available
Hmm.
there. Or I'm the one bringing the veggie tray, but that's a running joke in my subdivision. So
I'll put this right here next to the chips and dip.
yeah. So yeah, I think not making yourself, giving yourself some, pre-thought of how I can be successful at a party. Who am I excited to see and be with and talk to you? So
I love that, and yours overlap with mine. I love that, being present, being there for the people. Ultimately, that's what I'm there for. But that's what sweeps me up in the emotion. And this one's also a little different, right? Because maybe listeners caught on. Like this is one we're actually saying like eating can absolutely and probably should be a part of this. Let's just do it in a way that's not emotionally charged, right?
mm-hmm.
So I have underneath that exactly essentially what you had, which was focus on the people, have a plan, and preload protein, fiber. I did the exact same thing. It's like have a plan for it. What happens with me is that I a lot of times don't have a plan. I'm going looking forward to the people and I am there, and I get there, I'm like, oh shoot, like I didn't plan, I didn't bring. Either I'm hungry, and then that goes into my third point, which I've started doing a lot more in recent years. I do the same thing. I load up on protein and fiber. I will look for the highest volume, lowest calorie foods that we have. I use cucumbers a lot with a little bit of hummus. I use baby carrots. I love baby carrots. I use bell peppers. I fill up on that stuff before I go. And therefore, probably hour later when I'm at the party, I can absolutely approach some food from a celebratory manner, but I'm not going to go crazy because I'm not starving. I have a plan, and that was eating before I got there. And then I can just make far, far better decisions. And again, this side of emotional eating is getting swept up in the positivity of it. So we're not saying don't, go to the party and don't eat because you're emotionally eating. Have some tempering tactics in place so that when you come out of that party or you wake up the next day, you can feel good about your decisions. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
So here's another one, heavier one, tougher one. Number 4 would be depressed. And so curious your thoughts on this one, Danielle. It might have some overlap with the anxious piece, right? But let's talk a little bit about depression. And again, qualifier, medical and therapeutic considerations are absolutely on the table in the mix. Please use so accordingly. But what are your thoughts on the depressed side of things?
Yeah. Mine are get counseling and sleep and get people.
Yeah,
Um,
nice.
I think sleep is probably the easiest one. And obviously, you don't want to do that only.
Mm-hmm.
So those were just the three that came to mind.
Yeah, and I agree with those. I just really had one because I think it's fascinating and there is some new evidence around this. Exercise has been shown, and you know how I've already said, I'm going to say it again for like the 15th time, how pro medicine and pro therapy I am. However, there's some fascinating new research that has shown that exercise is 1.5 times more effective, listen to this, than therapy or medication alone. Okay. Exercise is 1.5 times more effective than therapy or medication alone at reducing depressive symptoms in healthy adults. So the study I'm referring to took a look at people that did not have clinically diagnosed depression, but we can all have depressive feelings. And what exercise in particular has been shown to be more effective than therapy or medication alone. And I think that's just really powerful. It's one of the gifts, I believe, again, of common grace that we have on earth. It is not to invalidate therapy. It's not to invalidate medication, but it is to say, because I'm pro therapy, pro medication, and I'm pro exercise. We should be taking a look, no pun intended, like this is a cocktail of options that we have to lean into and overcome some of those depressive symptoms, even if you're not clinically diagnosed with depression. Clinical diagnosis, of course, is different, but all of us in some way, shape, or form likely experience depressive symptoms. Exercise 1.5 times more effective. So I would take a look at your ability to regularly install exercise in your rhythms of life. Okay.
Yeah.
So the next one, 5, is distracted. We've talked about this one in a couple different ways already, but curious your thoughts on distractive eating. I think this is another one where our notes will overlap a little bit, but what do you got?
Yeah. I I have a pause app on my phone. So it
Mm,
really just it's kind of about meditation, kind of just like getting all the thoughts out,
mm,
um, giving them to God, writing them down and prioritizing them. So the distracted feeling I think overlaps, like you said, same with the depressed and the sad.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, some of these emotions are overlapping, but distracted, I kind of just think about prioritizing your thoughts, getting them out there so you know what they are. Um, so that was what I had.
And I have kind of, practice being present. So I have to be mindful of this too. When am I just eating and not actually thinking about my food? Or I'm not
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the rate at which I'm eating. That's the biggest signal, is when I have no mindfulness around how fast I'm eating. That tends to be a massive signal in my experience that I am completely distracted. And what am I doing?
Okay, so
Go
when you
ahead.
say that, I
Mm-hmm.
think that helps me. I think the biggest thing is slowing down. I think
Yeah,
we are always hurried. And when we're hurried, that's part of being
100%.
distracted too. So I get
100%.
get where
Something
you're
that
going with that now.
Yeah, and somewhere something that I've done is I've literally on my lunch, like at work, I've put my iPhone on the table next to me with a timer, and I set it, and I challenge myself to take 20 minutes to eat a meal. I have seen that be, even for me that teaches this stuff, I'm sometimes continually amazed at how, quote, long 20 minutes can feel, which is only because relative to how fast I usually eat. I could
Hmm.
wolf down a Chipotle burrito bowl in probably 6 minutes flat, like no problem. To extend that to 20 sets up a whole lot more of like mindfulness, just by the sheer fact that I have to kind of just like wait in between bites, which is really good technique, right? And then here's the irony. I feel fuller sooner, right? So you end up eating less. We've seen this time and time again. It takes time for your brain to catch up with your body, or your body to signal to the brain that it's satiated, that it's no longer hungry, which is different than being full. So I've done it where I set it down, and that's all with the purpose, like you said, of slowing this down. I've also done the thing where I turn off distractions. I am a habitual phone user, particularly in the middle of the day. And so being on my phone while I eat, I have to force myself sometimes to put it down. And then I also have used eating outside, sometimes just changing my environment, going out into the backyard or going outside my office. When I'm at the office, there's tables off to the side of it. Or when I go to Chipotle, I always try to eat outside, weather permitting. And that just changes it for me. It's not so much about being at a table inside and just shoveling down food. But it just kind of garners for me at least more mindfulness. And so finding ways to do that so that you can actually think about your thoughts while you're eating, as opposed to thinking about other things, which is, kind of the definition of being distracted. Okay. So that was 5. Number 6, lonely. What are your thoughts on this one? This one's interesting. I think it happens a lot of times with folks. You're at home by yourself, maybe watching TV, doing such, and
Yes.
out comes the food without you even noticing,
Yeah, you cut out there. Sorry.
Oh.
Are you back?
I am.
Okay.
Hopefully there was no cutout for the listeners.
Yeah. So for lonely, I guess I would say I'm probably experienced that with working from home more. So I have kind of a list of people in the neighborhood that can go on walks that also are working from home. Yeah. So knowing that there are lots of people around me working from home, that they could, pop out of their house for a short walk. So kind of, I think, building a community, if you don't already have it, would be what I would say.
That'd be awesome. And I love that yours is like physically, location wise, close to home. Mine will just supplement that and say, and even if when you don't have that available, reach out. We all have phones. We can all text, we can call, we can video chat, you can Marco Polo, you can FaceTime, whatever it is. You can get face to face with people, really quickly and be like, hey, I'm on my lunch. You got 5 minutes? I haven't seen you in a while. Or just texting that. And it might not be immediate response, but that's okay. So whether it's, really close to home or virtually or digitally, create some social connection, seek that out, have a bit of a plan. Like you said, have a network, have some folks that are in on it, like 3 or 4 go-tos, because in any given day, maybe one of them can't be there. But we all have different connection. I love doing that. I love going for walks middle of the day when I'm working from home by myself. Wife is teaching, kids are in school. I grab the dog Teddy. We go for a little walk, talk to a neighbor on the way out. It can be casual in that sense. It could be purposed. But yeah, finding that social connection is really powerful. The next one is sad. So this one's again, a bit of a heavier one, but curious your thoughts on the feeling of sadness.
Yeah, I put exercise. There's like a movie quote that always comes. It's like, exercise makes you happy, and happy people, I think I don't remember what that movie was, but so exercise is what I put. It. And then also journaling what you are grateful for.
Yep.
Can increase, being content. So.
Yep. I had that one too. Sadness, again, I'll always go back to, somewhat associating this with like depressive symptoms or sadness, right? So exercise being highly effective. And I wrote the same thing down. I wrote down, make a list of things you're grateful for, find a way to laugh along with someone, and just creating that laughter in that social environment can be a couple different, strategies on the sadness side. All right. And so 8 is stressed. I think we talked about this a little bit. Again, some of these overlap, some of these have the same strategies, but we wanted to call them out individually. So what are your thoughts on feeling stressed, which is maybe a little different than feeling anxious, a little different than feeling, distracted, depressed? Talk to me about stressed.
I would say I would typically like to practice this more often, but to write down all the things that I'm concerned about or worried about or stressed about, and then, really looking at them on paper, I think is really powerful, because I'm like, okay, well, that is like 2 weeks away. I can put that one on the side. Totally. Or, so it really narrows your list when you write them all out and you're like, okay, this this one I can, um, you know, put aside for now. So
Yeah, that's a big one. I had just really kind of two. One was breathing exercises. So this is where I had put the breathing exercises. I think it's also applicable to the anxious one as well. In fact, I was just working with a client yesterday on this, and I was explaining the process of box breathing, as we call it, and you referred to that square too, which in my experience, I actually first learned about this from Navy SEALs. So when I was in Iraq, I learned about box breathing. It's somewhat a shooter's exercise. It's actually something you use to keep your heart rate at a more consistent rhythm so that you can have better shots. So there's a fun fact for your day. But because obviously when you're in an environment, particularly like a sniper, your heart rate can change your ability to hit a target accurately. So I actually first learned about box breathing from the teams, but this is also, I've seen it also come up more recently, even with like Dr. Andrew Huberman on his podcast. I think he talks about box breathing. For me, and for what I often work on with my clients, is 4 seconds breathing in, 4 seconds holding, 4 seconds breathing out, 4 seconds holding. And so visually, what I'm envisioning in my head is 4 seconds up is the left side of the square. I hold as it moves to the right across the top. 4 seconds releasing is down the right side of the square. And then holding at the bottom of that breath is moving to the left to connect to the square. So that's what I use for box breathing. I used it last night, actually. I was starting to struggle to fall asleep, which is rare for me. And so I went right into box breathing mode. It's pretty much a habit or an instinct for me at this point, is when my mind is going too fast. I'm thinking about work the next day, the meetings I have, whatever that is. I tend to move to box breathing. And then the other one too, which could be said of most of these, is, finding a peaceful place to go for a walk. I'm very fortunate. We have a creek that runs behind the homes just across the street from me. I love sometimes going down there with the dog and just sitting for 5 minutes. It doesn't take a lot. Just get out of the environment. Again, I'm working from home, so I need to sometimes leave the home because that's my work environment. I need to just go outside. I need to listen to some water. I need to get the sun on my face. I need to have the wind hit my body. I just need to be out with the dog, moving. Those are some very practical, I think, very approachable ways that we can de-stress. And then the last one, because you added it, tired. Talk to me about tired. So one, just don't be tired. No, I'm kidding. But, so talk to us about tired now that I'm going to put you on the spot to give some commentary.
yeah. Well, I think the first thing that I did was, instead of having a snack, I found a drink. So sleepy time tea was what I chose, or just something relaxing to drink can be a stepping stone away from. It's almost like you're retraining your body to not become hungry, if you're in a habit of eating at that time every day. And so for being tired, I mean, the end goal is going to bed, or finding something that can be restful for you to rejuvenate, even if it's like setting a timer for, a 15-minute nap or something like that. But I am getting plenty of sleep, I promise. So anyway, I think that is what was really successful for me, is just taking away the association of the TV and snack, having a drink of something that can calm me. And I noticed that I am really tired when I'm warm. So sometimes I have to, like, if it's really tired during the day, I need to not be in a sweatshirt or a blanket. I need to take that off, so that I'm not feeling tired when I'm actually just warm. So yeah, kind of getting to know your body is really what it takes.
Very cool. Yeah, off the top of my head, and I was just working with a client on this that was struggling with some energy things, and so we've got his nutrition dialed in. He's on a weight loss journey. He's doing really well, but there's some energy issues. So one was, always take sleep inventory. Are you getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep? That's where it starts, right? 7 to 9, good quality, dark room, white noise, whatever it is, getting good 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Sometimes people are shocked to learn that I consistently get 9 hours of sleep. They think, with just kind of when they meet me and I'm a spaz and, have a couple different jobs, they all just think like, oh, you just never sleep. No, I do. I tried that once, sleeping very little after I got out of the military. It doesn't work long term. But I consistently love getting my nines, as I call it. If it, again, to your point, if it's during the day, so let's talk about during the day. If it's at night, we're probably just headed into going back to bed, which is fine. and we don't want to be just, mindlessly eating, because we're tired, but we're 2 hours from going to bed, right? But during the day, taking a power nap is entirely appropriate. That could be 15 to 20 minutes. I've seen that there's a depreciating return on naps after about 20 minutes. So it can actually leave you feeling more groggy,
More
less
tired.
productive. Yep. So be mindful of that there is something neurologically with around that 20-minute. That's where the term power nap, came from. I think it actually came from a book called Power Sleep. And so that is a very useful tool. Again, I would go to box breathing at times, and this is a strategy known as um, non-sleep deep rest, NSDR. And so I would set an alarm sometimes for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, same amount of a nap. Maybe I'm not planning to go to sleep, but I'm planning to lay down, close my eyes, have an alarm just in case, and go through 15 minutes of box breathing, or at least use the box breathing to rejuvenate me, refresh me, and then get back up 15 minutes later. So think about non-sleep deep rest or box breathing. And then again, if it's during the day and you can do so, you'd be surprised what a 1 to 3 minute cold shower could do. That will give you a shot of epinephrine and norepinephrine, which is adrenaline, noradrenaline. It can release dopamine, which can elevate your mood, et cetera, et cetera. And so there is nothing quite like, if you have the ability, a 1 minute quick cold shower. Very, very powerful cold water exposure for releasing some of that as well. Not always applicable. Like maybe you're at the office, you're out on the job site, you're at a hospital or whatnot. You can't just jump into a shower. But if you are and have the ability, even splashing water on your face has been shown. Cold water on your face a couple times has been shown to have some of the same releases within your body. So that is the end of our list of 9. That was our big chunk. That's number 4. So again, 1, be mindful. Number 2, identify your emotion. Number 3, learn to name and process your emotion. Number 4, have other outlets for processing and dealing with these emotions, which we just covered. Hopefully those strategies were helpful. And then number 5, we would be remiss to not say, look, if when you stumble, give yourself grace. Okay? It happens to all of us. Danielle and I have been teaching this stuff collectively for, 18, 20 years probably at this point. We've literally been teaching this stuff to clients, and we still struggle with it at times, okay? We're not above this. You're not below some standard. Just remember that this is a process. This is about slowly developing new habits and new rhythms and new capabilities with tools at your disposal along the way. So if when you stumble, give yourself grace. Okay. Danielle, thoughts from you? I've already given a little bit, but any thoughts on, as we close this, kind of the if you stumble environment, what to do then?
Yeah, I would just say remember that your body will give you signals of hunger. So listening to your body afterwards, you have more calories than your body needed at one meal doesn't mean, you may have less the next. I don't want you to intentionally have less. I want you to
Mm-hmm.
listen to your body and your appetite. So knowing that just, one time of doing this on occasion doesn't ruin anything. So it's not about being perfect. It's definitely about the process, like you said.
Absolutely. And the body works on averages over time. It's never one meal. It's never one night. It's never one party. It's never one cry session. It's never one Netflix night. None of that is what sets up how your body is going to, be year round. It is
Hmm.
about averages. It is about stacking the odds in your favor. It is about, yes, deploying some of these strategies. But if and when you stumble, just as I say, it's not a perfect analogy, but when you get knocked off the horse, you have 2 options. You can stay off the horse, you can get back on the horse, right? And the
Hmm.
people that succeed with health and wellness long term are the people that say, I know I'm going to get knocked off the horse. I know that's going to be true because I'm not perfect, but I will refuse to stay down. And I will
Hmm.
refuse for a Friday night to become a 3-month binge. I will
Hmm.
refuse, to allow an emotional event to then spiral out of control and become months long, Okay.
Hmm.
So getting quote back on track, even though I don't necessarily like that language, because it assumes you're either on or you're off the tracks, right? You're either broken or you're working. I don't like all that, but the idea of getting back on the horse, but I will tell you that you will stumble. Accept that. Be okay with that. We all do. Give yourself grace. Be grateful that one night, one meal, one binge, one weekend is not the determinant month after month, year after year. It's about what you do 85, 90, 95% of the time. Okay. So, with that, again, let me recap. Overcoming emotional eating, we would generally subscribe to a 5-step process. Number one, be mindful of this. Number two, identify that emotion specifically. Number three, name it, say it out loud. Learn to process that emotion and deal with that emotion without just simply resorting to eating. And then have these other outlets for dealing with it. Deploy strategies and tactics. Hopefully, some of these have been helpful. Discover your own if necessary. We've got to have other ways to deal with these emotions than just over consuming calories. And then, number five, if and when you stumble, give yourself grace. Get back on the horse. It does not mean you're a failure. It does not mean that you're broken. It does not mean that all results, are lost or all progress is lost. It's about the process, not perfection. All right. So, with that, if we can help with this or anything else, we are always here. We would love to hear from you as we're heading into these fall months. Would love to help as many people as possible, of course. So, if you'd like more on this, or you have a health goal that you would like to achieve this fall, even before the new year, for crying out loud, don't wait for January. If you could use some assistance, some coaching, some guidance, a cheerleader and a champion in your corner to give you strategies to achieve your goal, please reach out to us. You can get a hold of us at Imago Nutrition. That's imagonutrition.com/contact. And so if this has been helpful, please subscribe to the podcast so that you get notifications of future episodes. Drop us a review. Let us know how we're doing and share it with a friend. We would love to help as many people as possible. You can follow us on social media across all the major social media platforms, including Threads. We're on Threads now. Okay. So you can head over to @Imago Nutrition. Again, IMAGO Nutrition. And as always, we'd like to thank Happy Pill, the band, for our theme song, Think About Food. We'll see you next time.